Hi everyone. I saw this video today by Ted Stoermer, and I wanted to respond to it because it raises some interesting points that I think are important concerning combating ICE in ways that go beyond symbolic gesture alone and extend to intersectional action as informed by American slaves and abolitionists versus state power in America in the past. That's what Ted talks about, and then what I talk about in response is concerning the value of symbolic gesture regarding larger issues that intersectional action in the present moment can't face, but has to meet later on after the battle to win the war, which is overcoming capitalism as a whole. So what we'll do first is we'll listen to Ted's video, and then I'll read my response that I wrote to Ted, just weighing in. So without further ado, here we go.
Applies to them. Stephen Miller told ICE agents that no law but Trump's applies to them. That literally and legally, no one can touch them. No city official, no state official, no other justice but their own. J.D. Vance turned a dead American into a loyalty test. Every congressional Democrat and every Democrat who's running for president should be asked a simple question: do you think this officer was wrong in defending his life against a deranged leftist who tried to run him over? A deranged leftist who had just dropped her 6-year-old off at school. But hear what they're actually saying, embedded in all of this. One authority, theirs. No other law, city, state, doesn't matter. No other elected official, no other appointed official, no other justice, no other morality, just theirs. ICE is where they're applying the lesson. The lesson isn't about ICE. They're telling you who has rights and who doesn't, who counts as American and who doesn't. Forget what it says on your birth certificate. Forget what it says on your passport. Forget what it says on your federal ID or your green card. Are they wrong? Renee Good is dead, shot by an ICE agent in Minneapolis. A 37-year-old mother, a poet, a U.S. citizen, not a target, an observer. Video shows her turning away when she was killed. Her last words to her murderer: "I'm not mad at you." Then he shot her 3 times and called her a fucking bitch. That exchange is where America is today. Vance said she was brainwashed by left-wing ideology, part of a left-wing network. And the pardon power waits behind all of this. Even if someone, somewhere, brought charges against all odds through some sort of crack in the wall that has been built, the pardon is right there, the final word, a gift from the founders. So when Miller says no one can touch them, believe him. One authority, theirs. We've decided you are not America, not our America, not the America we're remaking. As a Supreme Court justice once wrote, "You have no rights we're bound to respect."
I just want to pause real quick and say that remaking, I think, is a bit generous, given that these are concepts that go all the way back to the founding of America as a settler colony, as a police state. So it's reinventing the wheel, but it's still the same wheel.
Sit with that. And when you're done, when you're ready to ask what to do, when you processed all that, grab a mirror and stare at it. And then listen to what people are doing when they reach for Nazi Germany or the Gestapo, and stop. Instead, reach for your own resistance history, because it's happened in the United States. We know what works and what doesn't, and it's not a protest. And black public historians have been saying this. I'm just building on their work. Look to America. For 80 years, presidents told black America exactly what Vance and Miller are saying right now. To a fifth of the population, no power protects you, only our power to oppress you. Massachusetts might say you're free. Pennsylvania might be state laws to combat slavery and protect people, to avoid the application of federal fugitive slave acts. Doesn't matter.
I also want to weigh in here and say that it's important to recognize that protest is often the language of those who can't fight back. So if you are able to act, do so. But also, if you're not able to, or if you're able to up to a point, but then need to rely on the help of others, protest does become a vital tool. Because if you're in a situation, say, the indigenous populations finding themselves on reservations where they have to reach out because they can no longer act in an immediate way by themselves, and they have to, acquire aid from others and appeal to other people for help, then protest is still an important tool. It's all a matter of context.
Our orders override what you call your laws. Nope, you are property. You will always be property. You can never be free. You can never have rights. Your very presence threatens real America, white America. Free black people will murder us, rob us, rape our women. You cannot be controlled, so you must be removed. George Washington said it. Thomas Jefferson said it. Lincoln said it to black leaders' faces in the White House in 1862. Your race suffer very greatly, many of them by living among us, while ours suffer from your presence. It is better for us both, therefore, to be separated. Put that along the Gettysburg Address. Yeah, slavery's wrong, but it doesn't change the color of your skin, which he said was the real issue. So the existence of black Americans is the problem. Lincoln couldn't change white people, so you gotta go.
Something else that I wanted to touch on here, not so much in what I wrote immediately responding to this, but elsewhere in the essay that I've read previously, is that racism isn't just an issue of skin color. It is in America, and that's largely what's going on with ICE. But in terms of combating fascism as a whole around the world, skin color isn't the only aspect to racism. It's also an identity. It's ultimately an ideology that's enacted on people regardless of their skin color. Say the English versus the Irish, or the Portuguese versus different peoples around the world. Racism is simply a belief system that's enacted on others to enslave them, often through skin color, especially in America, which is an important way of conceptualizing it in terms of how it's being enacted presently, but also in terms of garnering support around the world, not just to combat slavery in America, but elsewhere. We have to realize that it's not just about skin color. But as far as generating intersectional action here, right now, that is a good way of looking at it, because that's essentially what's going on. ICE is primarily targeting black and brown people, not white people.
And no power could stop federal power, their power, from enforcing that vision. Congress made it a crime to help someone escaping that power, a crime to give them food or shelter, a requirement to assist citizens deputized whether they liked it or not. In Dred Scott in 1857, the Chief Justice, Roger Taney, confirmed what the Constitution meant. Black people had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. That was not a betrayal of the founding. That was the founding. It was a confirmation of 80 years of Supreme Court jurisprudence from Marshall through Story.
And that's what I was referring to earlier in regards to they're not remaking America in regards to Trump and his cronies. They're preserving what was already there.
No avenues for peaceful change, for persuasion, for protest, none. Congress had shut it off. The courts had shut it off. The president never opened the door. The power of words had limits. So what was their way out? Not another march, not another petition, not more voices. Action. That's why the term isn't community words. It's community action.
Right, but action and words go hand in hand. And this is something I'll address at the end. It's not just one or the other, but both. Action is guided by words and vice versa at the same time, across space and time, on different battlefields going on simultaneously. this includes in the United States, because this is going to be on a case-by-case basis per state, and states interacting back and forth, and then globally as well, because fascism is everywhere. It's not just in America. So, what do other countries do? How do they respond to America's example? Because America is commonly setting the example insofar as fascism goes. The Nazis were responding to and emulating America.
Direct action. In Massachusetts, they made the Fugitive Slave Act unenforceable, and they didn't do it through speeches. They did it through community action. They put their bodies between federal power and the people it wanted to chew up and spit out. It made federal agents' lives so miserable, harassment, confrontation, obstruction, that they gave up and went home. When hunters came for William and Ellen Craft, Boston's Vigilance Committee had them arrested repeatedly, hit them with $30,000 in bonds, and driven out of Boston entirely. Lewis Hayden, who had escaped slavery himself, sheltered hundreds fleeing enslaver power in his Beacon Hill home. He kept kegs of gunpowder by his front door. He told the agents, "Come in, we all die together, let's see what your commitment is."
I love that. So these are great examples historically, like where you have intersectionality in regards to slaves and white people working together, as opposed to Howard Zinn, A People's History of America, where the loyalty of the middle class, specifically white indentured servants, was purchased through middle class privilege to betray the collective interests of all parties involved by stabbing slaves and indigenous peoples in the back. And here we have the opposite of that. People making their own history through collective action, where people of privilege are using that privilege to protect people without privilege from the state. I think that's excellent.
And when they seized Shadrach Minkins in a Boston courthouse, black men stormed in and took him back. Were the consequences? Sure. 9 abolitionists were indicted. None were convicted. Juries wouldn't do it. Not because they all opposed, but enough did. Even a majority of one honest person on a jury saying not guilty was enough. Go ahead, send your troops. Can't stay forever. Federal law was on the books. But
that's true, too. With any occupation, occupations can't last. And this includes the violence that they commit against a given territory. Overseas, dropping bombs and killing populations is never enough to subjugate the land. In terms of Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, territories like that, they ultimately have to leave. It is not something that they can do forever. And the same applies to the United States. When the imperial boomerang sails home, it is doing so according to a land that is more susceptible to people being less prone to attack their own, because ultimately the colonizers are being recruited from to attack themselves. And pushing back against that process is something that can be done in the methods that Ted's talking about.
Reach was cut off, not by words, by what people did. That's what resistance looked like, not symbolic protest. Gunpowder at the door, making agents' lives unlivable,
backing up words with action, essentially.
Them, confronting them, exhausting them. Make them claim immunity from the power of the people. Now see if they can use it. That's what happened. That's our history. It happened in the United States. We know what works. You don't need to look to Germany in the 1930s. You need to look to America. You need to look in the mirror. For more on this, a great work.
So that final statement was the one where I was lying in bed and I saw this video pop up in my feed. I watched it. I heard that sentence at the end. Don't look to Nazi Germany, look to America, look to our own history. And I thought, oh, okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And a lot of the examples here that Tad gave, I agreed with. I thought that they were practical. Actionable plans in the face of fascism is important. And I decided to write a small response, specifically an addendum in my essay, The Wolf is Loose, where I talk about fascism and dealing with it essentially giving my own thoughts and perspectives combined with those of others. That includes non-white people, but also other white people such as myself, though in my case I'm trans and Ted is a white straight guy. So keeping all of that in mind, I wrote a small response to Ted and will read that now. Note: some compare ICE not to the Gestapo, but American slavers, slave catchers. On one hand, I would caution against seeing these as separate, given the Nazis were slavers emulating Americans. Furthermore, despite a race impetus under fascism, it is also guided by parallel bigotries affecting other minorities during their own simultaneous genocides, e.g. trans people, sex workers, and indigenous parties. It's not just about race, but race intersecting with other qualities that invite racial violence regardless of ethnicity. To punch up is to be treated as non-white, and to be non-white is to likewise be treated as queer, and so on. These are modules of oppression that unto themselves commonly intersect and have similar outcomes, namely police brutality. On the flip side, Ted Stoermer says, don't look to Nazi Germany and symbolic resistance, look to America. In other words, to slavery and collective action, meaning intersectional action. This strikes a chord with me, because it presents a practical, actionable plan, i.e. one that faces the current and ongoing problems America generates in ways historically met with success, at least concerning slavery as debated between individual states. Ultimately, I still posit symbolic gestures are important, insofar as they challenge larger forces at work beyond the present moment, capital, capitalist realism, and the state model. To that, you can stop temporarily the tendrils of the octopus of racism, but not from existing as part of the state's endless demand for exploitation, i.e., unless symbolic gestures alter the superstructure enough, re hearts and minds, breaking capitalist realism to solidarize workers on all fronts, across space and time. To me, combating federal invasion, then, still feels symptomatic for a larger ideology, one that ultimately saw slavery never leave after the Civil War and its slave revolts. Reconstructions blocking by state power in ways slaves white abolitionists couldn't immediately fight, which ultimately required the civil rights movement and symbolic gestures a century later under Jim Crow. Fascism doesn't have to win the war. It just has to protect capital, and does so namely by sacrificing itself. Straw dogs, disposable within a last-ditch effort as capital dies an agonizingly slow death. And sure, challenging symptoms often takes priority in the present moment. Triage is triage. It boils down to short-term and long-term goals, dialectical material and historical material, the battle and the war, the sickness and the vector. Both are important, and both can occur side by side. They must, in fact, lest fascism return post-mortem, i.e. like the Nazis, who were not the first, i.e. they were emulating Americans on foreign soil, enslaving their own people and those of the Soviets. In short, vital lessons can be learned from American history and its white and non-white resistance fighters alongside German examples. Combine what is useful from both eras and areas to solve not just capital's decay, but capital as a whole that decays, i.e. what will decay forever, until workers hit upon the root of the problem, not the blossom. We can do both. Ultimately, fascism, as something to combat, requires breaking the illusion of a quick and easy victory delivered by godlike supermen post-betrayal. This happens not with words, but action. With Operation Barbarossa, for example. Hitler, a famous megalomaniac, insisted, kick the door in, and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down. Very much like a cop. But fascism equals traitors defending the system as cowards do, eager to attack the helpless and hopelessly afraid should resistance meet them on the field. The Soviets fought back, proving the Nazis mortal after all. Same goes for ICE, who, despite appearing tough, aren't indestructible terminators. At the very least, they feel fear, and that, for now, is enough. So yeah, this is just a short little response to Ted Stoermer. I enjoy their content a lot. They talk about resistance history. I talk about combating capitalist realism. These are definitely not mutually exclusive concepts, so I definitely recommend that you check out Tad's stuff. I especially enjoy Tad because they take a lot of complicated ideas and, frankly, inaccessible history for a lot of people, just insofar as they borrow from older historical documents that not everyone has access to, and they translate it into quick, easy to understand videos. They're conversational, but informative, and they're based on actual resistance history, as Tad would put it, that I find easy enough to understand. And I've learned a lot from Tad's perspective, and I appreciate it. And this is obviously a complicated issue insofar as, while slavery itself is something that we should challenge in a simple way. Some people have power, some people don't. We should challenge that. That unto itself is simple, but then the complexity arises insofar as we have to challenge fascism, but also the state at the same time, which is something that I don't think Tad does quite as much. I don't think they're an anarcho-communist like I am, and I think that they could perhaps learn a little bit from viewpoints other than just their own history that they understand. America isn't just a history of white straight guys or black slaves. It's also a history of queer revolutionaries, e.g. Stonewall, e.g. the AIDS crisis, e.g. what's happening right now in America at the same time. It's not just learn from the slaves, but also learn from queer people who don't have a national body politic to draw upon. Post-diaspora, we are a people without a nation. We don't come from a specific land or place. Queer people, that is. But our resistance is important, and it is all ultimately oftentimes symbolic or theatrical, because that's the only place that we're allowed to exist. So to discount symbolic gestures is to, by and large, discount queer voices in ways that could otherwise be included within intersectional action. So just something to keep in mind, Tad. Thank you for making your stuff. It's rich food for thought. It provides a lot of vital instruction and precedent. So thank you. Thanks for watching. And until next time, stay safe out there.